Hitfilm Express is a cut-down version of Hitfilm Pro, a powerful video editor from FX Home. It's a cut-down version because it's free. All you need to download and install it is to have an account with FX Home. In this series of tutorials, I want to take you slowly and deliberately through the many capabilities of this software. A cut-down version it may be, but it should prove adequate for most amateur users. The initial 3 episodes of the series will concentrate on the user interface, customizing the workspace, and basic editing. Depending upon the amount of interest in these episodes, I'll move onwards to more complex editing techniques. I'll assume that you've registered an account with FX Home, have downloaded the installation package and installed the software. I have to point out here that the word Express has been dropped from the application's name. It is simply referred to as Hitfilm, as opposed to the more powerful Hitfilm Pro. At the end of the installation, you'll have the option of launching Hitfilm. When you do so, there'll be a short video sequence promoting the capabilities. You'll also be prompted to log in using your registration details. One thing to note, the installation doesn't create a desktop shortcut, so you need to create one yourself. Be aware that you'll be urged to upgrade to the Pro version every time you launch the software. It's a bit of a nuisance, but a small price to pay for using the free version. A sample project will be loaded on launching the software for the first time. This project is called myfirstproject.hfp and can be found at this location. Now, with this project loaded, there's a lot going on. To avoid information overload, I'm going to close it so I can concentrate on the user interface alone. To close this project down, I need to create a new one or load an existing one. In this case, I'll load a simple project with 2 media items. One of the first things you'll notice is a panel on the left-hand side, displaying a list of tutorials available. Feel free to explore these tutorials, as they will be a valuable source of information. At the top of the screen you'll see the menu options. There's an option on the right labelled Learn, which has a switch. To remove the tutorials panel, deactivate the switch. The UI consists of a number of what FX Home refers to as containers. These containers can have one or more windows tabbed within them. These windows are referred to as panels, which can be undocked, moved around, and redocked inside other containers. This feature allows custom layouts to be created and saved. More on this in a later tutorial. The default layout has 5 containers, which I'll describe briefly now. At the top left is the trimmer panel. Because it's a single panel, it can be referred to as either a panel or a container. As its name suggests, this is where you will trim, in other words, cut down your media items before placing them on the timeline. At the top right is a container consisting of 2 panels, Viewer and Export. The Viewer panel allows various functions to be performed, depending on which tool is currently selected. The 5 tools on the toolbar are the Selection tool, You use this tool to select objects in the viewer. An object is selected when it is a blue bounding box. In this case, the selected object is the media item itself, so it has a blue bounding box. It will also have transform controls, which I'll deal with in another tutorial. The Translate tool. This tool simply moves the viewing window around in the viewer panel. Useful for moving around the media when the viewing panel is zoomed in. The Text tool is used when you want to overlay text onto the media in the viewer. This is referred to as compositing. The Rectangle Mask tool, used for creating masks of various fixed shapes. Freehand Mask tool, used for creating masks by drawing them. The use of the Text, Rectangle Mask and Freehand Mask tools is beyond the scope of this tutorial, so I'll be dealing with their use in future tutorials. The Export panel is where you will create your final video from the current project. At the bottom left is a container with several tabbed panels. The Library panel allows you to access stock media. It has 3 sections: music, sound effects and templates. Each section contains a variety of media types, with one variety which is free. Other media in the sections are only available if you upgrade to the Pro or Creator version of Hitfilm. The Media panel displays, amongst other things, all the media contained within the project. It's also where you can import media into the project. The Effects panel lists all the video and audio effects available. There's a handy Favourites folder which can contain links to your favourite effects. The Controls tab opens up a panel that displays the various attributes applied to a selected event. At the side of the Controls tab, you'll see a small right pointing arrowhead. If this is white, it means that there are more tabbed panels in the container. Click this arrow to move to the next tabbed panel. The History panel displays a list of actions taken during the current project. It's possible to undo a selected action or redo it. The final tabbed panel is for changing the attributes of any selected text. We know it's the final tabbed panel because the arrowhead is no longer white. At the bottom right is a panel that displays the amplitude of any audio tracks as the timeline is being played. At the bottom centre is the Editor panel. This is where most of the action will take place. It consists of the timeline, the track headers, and the editing tools. Now for a little more detail, but to keep this tutorial fairly simple, I'm not going to go into too much detail when describing each panel. The Trimmer panel. When you import a video event or double-click an event in the media panel, that event will be loaded into the trimmer panel. You can also load a video event on the timeline by double-clicking it. Note that this method doesn't work if the event is an image. With an event loaded, its file name will be displayed at the top left of the panel. If the event is a video event and it's been loaded from the timeline, a time value will be displayed at the side of the file name, indicating where on the timeline the event starts. A blue line is displayed immediately below the event. This line represents the event's length, and a white dot represents the position of the trimmer playhead on that event. At either end of this line is a time display. The one at the left represents the time at the trimmer playhead's current position relative to the start of the event. The one at the right displays the total length of the event. If you hover the mouse pointer over the left-hand time display, the cursor changes into a two-headed arrow. Left-click and hold, then move to transport the playhead along the trimmer timeline. You can also transport the playhead by left-clicking and holding on the white dot and moving it. This is commonly referred to as scrubbing. It's worth pointing out that right-clicking the mouse while over either time display will allow you to change the units of display from time to frame. Below this timeline are a number of icons that allow the event to be trimmed. I'll assume that you're familiar with the concept of trimming. From the bottom left, these icons are Loop Playback. Fairly obvious, this one. Unselected, it will have a blue background when selected. The event or trimmed part of the event will be played repeatedly until stopped. Set In Point. To set the start of the trim, move the playhead to a required point on the timeline and click this icon. Set Out Point. To set the end of the trim, move the playhead to the required point and click this icon. With both these points set, the blue line will only be displayed between them. In the middle are the transport controls. These are return playhead to the start of the event, move backwards one frame, move forwards one frame, and play the event. Note that the play icon changes into a pause icon when it's activated. At the right are two icons that control how the trimmed event will be applied to the timeline. The Insert Clip icon places the trimmed event on the timeline starting at the playhead position. If the playhead is already on a timeline event, that event will be split at the playhead position and the trimmed event placed between the two sections of the existing event. The overlay clip icon performs a similar function, but this time the trimmed event will replace the existing event starting at the playhead. The playback resolution drop-down list displays options which determine the quality of playback. The final drop-down list allows the trimmer panel to be displayed at a variety of magnification factors. You can also zoom in and out of the display using the mouse wheel. The viewer panel. I've already dealt briefly with the tools available on the toolbar, so I won't go into more detail here. As with the trimmer panel, a blue line under the display represents the timeline. This timeline, though, is the total timeline of the project. A white dot signifies the position of the playhead on the timeline. By left-clicking and holding this dot, it can be moved along the timeline. Like the trimmer panel, scrubbing the timeline can also be achieved by hovering the mouse pointer over the left-hand time value until the mouse cursor changes into a two-headed arrow. Then click, hold and drag. Also, like the trimmer, the time value can alternatively be displayed as frame values. If you look directly underneath the playhead position time field, you can see four icons. The first one allows the frame at the current playhead position to be exported. Think of this as a viewer image capture feature. Clicking it opens up a dialog box with several options. The next three icons perform a similar function to the ones in the trimmer panel described earlier. In this case, though, the set in point and set out point values define what's referred to as the work area. This work area determines not only the loop playback range, but also the part of the project that may be exported if required. In the middle are the now familiar set of transport control icons. At the bottom right there are three drop-down option lists. The first one, labelled Options, contains settings that affect the way the viewer or viewer contents are displayed. The next list contains quality and resolution settings. The important point to note here is that quality and resolution settings can be set different for playback to those set for paused playback. The last drop-down list displays a number of magnification factors for the display. As with the trimmer panel, you can also zoom in and out of the display using the mouse wheel. This is handy for zooming in on a particular part of the display. You would then use the hand tool to move the display around. I'm not going to describe the container that includes the library, media, effects, etc., because that would take too much time. I'll be dealing with each of these panels in future tutorials. The really important panel comes next, the editor. This is where you build up your project with various media items, add transitions, add effects, etc. At the left side of the panel is a column containing various tools. These tools are used to manipulate media on the timeline, and their use is beyond the scope of this tutorial. I'll be dealing with these in future tutorials. Next to the toolbar is a track list. By default, this consists of a video track, an audio track, and a master track. Each track has a lock icon which, when selected, locks the track and all items on that track. The video track has an eye icon which allows the track to be hidden. This is useful when you have multiple video tracks and you want to concentrate on one particular track. The audio track has a speaker icon which allows you to mute that particular track. It also has an extra icon. This allows you to toggle between clip and track envelopes. I'll be dealing with audio envelopes in a future tutorial. The master track simply controls the amplitude of the project's audio. To the right of the track list is the timeline. This is where clips are placed and where the project is built up. I'm not going to go into detail here, but a point to note when a video clip is placed on the timeline is that a chain link icon will be displayed on both the video and audio parts of the clip. This signifies that the audio and video are locked together. Moving one will move the other. If it's required to separate the two, right-clicking on the clip and selecting Unlink will do that. Each part of the clip can then be moved, independent from the other. Note that if you move the two apart, then select Link, the two parts will be linked, but they will be unsynchronized. At the bottom of the track list, there's a slider with plus and minus magnifying glass icons at the end. You use this slider or click on the icons to expand or contract the timeline. So that's a fairly brief tour of the Hitfilm user interface. It may appear daunting at first, and I'll admit that there's a fairly steep learning curve involved. But if you want a free, quite powerful non-linear editor, this will fit the bill. If you found this tutorial useful, please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already done so. Join me for the next episode in this series, when I'll be dealing with customizing the UI. Until then, bye for now.